Hello and welcome to the 15th video in this series, making simple Flappy Robin using version 3 of Cocos2dx, eventually for Android. Just building the application here because I was looking at a couple of things and making sure everything's okay, and it seems to be okay. Good. Okay, what I want to do in this video then, I did say at the end of the last video we're going to look at adding in the keeping of score. I've actually changed my mind and I want to add in the settings scene for now. So it's a scene that we'll go to from our main game scene by clicking the settings label. You remember it's at the top right hand side of the application, and that will then open up a settings scene, and in there we'll be able to change the effects volume and the music volume, but we'll do that at a later date because, like I've already said, I want to do all the settings and stuff inside the Java layer in the Android app so you can see how that works. So now that we've done this then, the way we need to add the scene, what we're actually going to do is going to do a bit of a hack job. We're going to basically copy and paste the Hello World scene class and then take out all the stuff that we don't need. But before we do that then, I'm just going to make a new file. You've seen this before, just a new C++ class, and I'm just going to call it settings scene, like so. And now we can start hacking away at the code a little bit. So what I want then is everything for the Hello World scene, the Hello World class definition there, dropped on top of this horrible IO stream which gets included by default every single time. And then we'll just delete this Cocos2d.h, everything apart from Cocos2d.h there, and let's change the class name before we do anything else. And now looking at the stuff we need in here, we don't need those private variables. We do need some labels. So we're going to have I'll call it a back label. We're going to have a music volume label plus, and music volume minus, and then we're going to have an effects volume plus. And we won't use these in this video, but they'll come later. We might as well add them at least as variables now. I'll let an effects volume minus like that, and the other labels won't be needed as member variables referenced. So we can take everything else out apart from the add label, which we're going to use again. Now obviously reusing this add label here, and we're going to use exactly the same code that we've got inside hello world scene.cpp. It's just for speed. I'm not going to change anything there, but what you would normally do, and for instance what I've done I do in my projects, is I have a separate sort of C++ file, or C file really, where I have a load of static functions in that basically do things like add labels, do various things to sprites, anything that you find yourself doing repetitively, add a background, that kind of stuff. I just include that header file and the source file in each of my projects, and then it's available then to use, so I don't end up having to repeat code. But here we'll just leave it like this. This add label will be used for these labels here where we need the reference to the label, but we'll also be adding some labels where we never need a reference. So what I'm going to do here is just type void, and I'll actually change the name as well of this. So add label void, like so that we've got this add label void function in here as well. Then anything else, we don't need anything else. We've got the settings scene there for the static create method, and our onTouch began. So into hello world scene.cpp, I'm going to copy everything from the include constants.h, actually right down to the bottom to the add label, just copy and drop this in, and then we're going to obviously do a major hack job and cut most of it out. So create scene we need, the initialization we need, except we don't need the setup scale factors, we don't need these constants here, we need the creation of a background, but everything else up to the listener can come out. We'll leave the listener in. We don't need an update scheduler like so we can already leave everything like this. I'll change the class name shortly. So game update we don't need. Touches began we do need, but the game over doesn't exist obviously, and the accept touches doesn't exist. Then add cloud, start cloud, stop create, all of this disappears right down to add label at the bottom. So I'll just take that out. And now what we need is the name of the class, so settings scene, and just to change the prefix here. And everything should now be looking reasonably okay. Shouldn't get too many errors, and should get some green code actually appearing, hopefully, as the indexer realizes everything's now okay. Okay, so down the bottom then here, let's just create our other label function that returns a void. So we've got add label void, and this returns a void obviously, but not a void pointer. Things will get interesting. Just take the return off there. Good, so that's our settings scene then more or less now set up. The last thing I want to do inside this scene, however, is just add in our back label so that at least we've got that on the screen, and we'll do that after we've added on the background. First thing we'll do, as usual, is declare some constants for positioning. So we'll say back button, button, I'll call it bottom, so the bottom there, and that will be 40 pixels multiplied by get scale y multiplied by get scale factor. And then I'm just going to copy this line here. So that's the space between the back button and the bottom of the screen scaled. Then we want back button left, which will be the space to the left hand side of the screen, which we're going to make 80 pixels, but scaled in the X direction obviously, because it's related to the X. And also then we'll have the font size, which I'll just paste in what was already copied, and we'll leave that for now at 40. So 40 times scale y times scale factor. Okay then, so all that's remaining now then is actually to add the label. So we've got back label equals add label. So the font size we have. The text we want then is back in capitals. The anchor point, well, we want 0.0 by 0.0. That should be fairly clear from the previous videos explaining anchor points. And then the position we want then is we want the back button left as the X and the back button bottom as the Y. And that's then completely set up with the back label then our settings scene. So we'll come back into here when we talk about how we're going to actually run the settings scene and then be able to go back to the Hello World scene. If you look inside app delegate, you'll see that we get from our create scene static function Hello World, we get the pointer to a Hello World scene. And then we tell the director to run this scene. Now director has two functions. It has replace scene and run with scene. If you're already running a scene and you want to run a new one, then you call replace scene. If you're not running a scene, you call run with scene. That's the main difference between the two there. So what we're going to do is add a function into the game manager class, which will then run our scene. To do this, we need to define a couple of constants as always, so that we can number our scenes. So we'll say k scene and game is 0, and then we'll define k scene settings as a 1. And then in the C game manager here we'll have a void, and we'll call this run scene with, it's a constant I suppose, scene num. And then we take this function then into cgamemanager.cpp, and I'll do this right at the top actually, like so, and just take the prefix of the cgame manager as well and drop this in. Okay then, so for our run scene, so the first thing we need is to make a pointer to our scene, so we'll call it pscene, and that's set to null straight away. And now we can say, I'm just going to build this actually, the indexing seems to have gone crazy, so just make sure everything's okay. Okay, good. So now what we can say is that if the scene number, and the indexing still failing, is equal to k scene game, so if we're saying we want to run the game scene, then we'll say that our scene pointer is equal to hello, and I need to include, I don't have them at the top, do I? Okay, so I need to include the header files, of course, for these classes. So we have the hello world scene.h, and we want to include the settings scene.h as well, otherwise things will be difficult. So here we want to say hello world create scene, will get us a pointer then, exactly the same method as was done inside the app delegate, remember, using the create scene here, like so. Will get us the pointer to our scene. Otherwise we'll say else, and then we can just copy this because it's an if, and this time if it's k scene settings, then we'll call our settings scene and create scene. And now what we can say then is if our pointer to scene is not equal to null, which means we sent in the correct constant, it measured up to, it matched one of these two constants here. So if it's not null, then we can say that if the director get instance, I think should be get instance and get running scene. So get instance and get the current running scene is equal to null. So i.e. if there's no current scene running, then what we can do is we can say director get instance and then run with scene and then our pointer to our scene. So that's exactly like what's happening in the app delegate. Otherwise there's already a scene running, so we'll say replace the current scene with whatever scene we've just tried to create. So that's actually all we need to do now, and every time we need to change a scene in the game we simply need to call this run scene with the correct constant number inside our game manager. So last but not least we just need to implement this code here. I'm just checking which label it is then. So we want to use then the settings label here inside Hello World scene. So inside onTouchBegan here, what we'll do here is we'll make a new point and I'll call it TP for touch point, and that equals then point, and we want the get touch location X and get touch location Y. And now we can say that if and the settings label get bounding box dot contains point and then TP. So if we touch the settings label, then we can say C game manager instance and run scene, and we want K scene settings because we want to run our settings scene from Hello World. And now we'll just copy this code here like so, and then we'll drop into the settings scene inside the onTouchBegan here after playing our effect. And now what we'll do is we'll say that if the back label contains the point, then we'll run our K scene game, which will take us back to the game. So deep breath and run the application. So we've got everything up here. Hopefully I've turned the volume down, and now if I hit settings you see we've now gone to our settings screen, and if I hit back we're back into the game screen. In fact, if I leave things running and hit settings, we've gone here and now we're back with the screen replaced and ready to go. Good, so that's it then for this video. I've gone through that relatively quickly because, to be honest, there's not actually much new code. The main thing is the settings scene code is almost identical to Hello World scene in the way that it works. The only main thing is to understand the concept of how we run scenes here. And doing it in this way allows us actually to add scenes into the application very, very easily and just tell the game manager to run them like this and then do them with constant numbers as well. So in the next video what we might do then actually to continue this theme is actually add in a splash scene as well, and then we'll get back to look at setting up the settings scene properly with the other labels and things. So thanks very much for watching. Comments, questions, criticisms welcome as always on YouTube.